Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the third episode of Logical Nonsense. For those of you who are new, this is a casual podcast with a casual guy talking about sports, hip hop, and fashion. And so, if you don't like one of those sections, like if you're not a sports guy but you want to hear some of what's going on in fashion or some of what's going on in hip hop, feel free to skip through. It's very laid back here. I'm no expert in any of these. I just like to overanalyze things, have some fun with it. We're gonna have some of my buddies on here. We've had some great sports debates in the past, and I think it'd be great to bring a casual culture to the podcast world. And so, yeah, I'm glad you've joined along, and I'm glad you're either listening or watching this, whatever platform you're using for this. For our first segment today, we are going to be going over little preview with NBA free agency. Some news today came out. Nikola Vucevic is going to be Nikola Vucevic. Yeah, he's going to be re-signing with the Chicago Bulls, 3-year extension, I believe. So that's good because he was in my list to go over. But let's just go over some of the restricted and unrestricted free agents. Draymond Green is one of the bigger storylines. Still, he's been a part of a lot of championship teams with the Warriors. He's been an essential part of that team. Obviously, they're a little different players, that kind of thing, but a lot of people compare him to a Dennis Rodman with the Jordan teams. I'm not a huge fan of comparisons. I think they're different players. However, they have similar styles, which is why the Warriors want him. A lot of basketball teams need that, for lack of a better term, dirty player on their team. The guy who kind of does the dirty work, gets rebounds, plays really good defense, talks a little trash, gets in the other team's head a little bit. I mean, the Grizzlies started with Dylan Brooks, didn't work out so well, but if you look at very successful teams, there's usually some sort of player like that. Dennis Rodman, obviously, is a classic example of one. Other ones, Ron Artest, Meta World Peace. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I know they go by different. I think at the time he was Ron Artest though. So yeah, I mean a lot of teams need those. Steve Kerr was quoted as saying that he feels like Draymond Green is essential to the team. If you look at their team core, I would say their team core has always been Steph, Clay, and Draymond, and they have paid a lot of money to keep those three. How much money they're willing to continue to pay to keep those three, especially as they're getting older, will be interesting to see. Obviously, the Warriors just acquired Chris Paul, which is an interesting dynamic in itself because it's like, do you move Stephen Curry to the 2? Do you move Chris Paul to the 2? Chris Paul is more of a true point guard, especially now that he's not shooting as much. He's more so a leader than anything, which I'm a huge Chris Paul fan, but at this stage of his career, I just don't know how much he helps the Warriors right now, what he really offers that the Warriors don't already have, if that makes sense. I do, look, for me to be saying this out of anyone, you can ask any, like, I will always love Chris Paul. I think he is a definition of a true point guard who can lead a team. I think his leadership skills are great. I think what he did at the Thunder was truly the greatest example. And it may be a little cliche now. I feel like that example's a little overused just because everyone goes back like, oh my God, he did such a great job with the Thunder. He was such a great, like, he developed SGA, he developed Lou Dort, like all these guys, but they never really use another example, right? Let's go back to early in his career. New Orleans. Roster, not the greatest. Emeka Okafor, the only guy I can really think of at this point, and he did very well on those teams still. Granted, he was a much different player back then. I would say he scored a lot more. I mean, he was, like I said, he was a much different player back then, but like that was his development, and he still made those teams good. I'm pretty sure they made multiple playoff runs. I'm not, like, don't quote me on that. I wasn't around then. I just know he was a very successful player. Pretty sure he won Rookie of the Year with them. He had very, very good seasons with them. Moves on to the Clippers. And at one point, whether you believe it or not, there was a time where it looked like the Clippers were going to beat that Warriors team right before they went on that run. I believe it was that first year that they won that championship. The Clippers were about to take down the Warriors and blew I want to say a 3-1 lead. And so I think looking at that, Chris has had so many opportunities with New Orleans, the Clippers, with the Houston Rockets, the Thunder, and the Suns, where he has been the leader on the team and they have consistently found success. The past 2 years have been disappointing, especially for me as a fan of him. But last year, I think, was a weird year for him, and I think you saw him digress a little bit, and I think we will really see what he can offer to the table on a team like this that already has a team core and doesn't necessarily need the biggest leadership anymore. They've got veterans, like I said, Steph, Clay, Draymond. Do you need another Chris Paul on your team to lead a group of already leaders, I guess? I don't know what I'm trying to say here. All I'm trying to say is Chris Paul the answer, I guess? I don't know. It's a rhetorical question. We're going to find out. I think the biggest reason they got Chris Paul was not necessarily for Chris Paul, but more so to get rid of the bad blood of Jordan Poole, so that way they could keep that core of Draymond Green. So, and we'll see. Draymond Green hasn't decided if he's going to stay yet. That's still up in the air. I think that move was more so of getting rid of Jordan Poole than it was of acquiring Chris Paul. So, we'll see how it works out for them. I think one of the bigger, probably one of the biggest free agents that we're questioning where they go is Fred VanVleet. He has become a very versatile guard. A lot of people think he's overrated just because that Rockets roster wasn't the best. And so when you are relying on less guys, you have to look to use what's on your roster. And at the time, they had Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. Those were their two main guys, and so they were really relied on to score. Regardless, he's had some success in the last few years, and he's had some good seasons. Teams that are interested right now, the Lakers, Sixers, Spurs, Rockets, Clippers, Jazz, and Magic. The teams I see him being successful on are the Lakers, the Spurs, the Rockets, and possibly the Sixers. I'll get to the Sixers in a second. The Lakers I like, and here's why I like the Lakers. The Lakers need a point guard. They've been searching for it for the last however many years. You look at their championship teams, and the closest thing they had to a true point guard was Rajon Rondo in the playoff run in the Mickey Mouse Championship that they won. Yes, I'm that guy. Yes, you can get mad at me. I don't care. And like that was it. D'Lo was their hope to kind of fill in that role. He was very inconsistent. Pretty much, they also had Russell Westbrook, and it's not that Russell Westbrook did a bad job. It's more so that Russell Westbrook had such a high standard on him that every time he wasn't having a good game, there was so much negative light brought onto him that there was so much negative energy around him. And that's why I think ultimately the Lakers got rid of him, just because that locker room was just not good. It's not that it wasn't Russ's fault. Truly, it wasn't. It was this media standard, which sucks. I think it sucks when the media puts this kind of image of somebody and then it screws with their mojo. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan. So, yeah, like I was saying, I think Fred VanVleet offers enough on the table as a point guard to fill in the role that they've been looking for. He can shoot. He's scrappy on defense. And he can pass, ultimately. We've seen him play with Kawhi Leonard, won the championship 2019. He's been deep in playoff runs like that. You know, he's got that veteran experience. And if I'm being honest, how many more years does LeBron have with the Lakers? We've said this before with other legends. I think LeBron's a good guy to compare to with like a Tom Brady. You know, we all thought, oh, there's no way he's going past 40. Just now retired, man. Like, we don't know how long these guys want to play. And with so much technology allowing them to play for basically however long they want, not, you know, to an extent, I guess. But I think you understand what I'm trying to say. LeBron, it's ultimately up to LeBron for how long he wants to play. My personal prediction on this is that LeBron is going to play with the Lakers and try to win with the Lakers until his son is on a team. And the moment his son is on an NBA team, he's going to play with his son maybe 1 or 2 years, and then he's out. That's my prediction. Just seems like the logical. I mean, I don't know. I just think that's what he wants to do. And we'll see. I think Fred VanVleet would be a good guy. But there's also talks about Kyrie Irving going to the Lakers. So, I mean, we'll see. I think Kyrie personally has not shown that he can do a big three anymore. I don't really need to explain this one. I don't really want to get into this segment and go down this pathway. But if they don't get Kyrie, I think Fred VanVleet is not a bad option for the Lakers. As far as the Spurs, they just got the best prospect in all of basketball. And you want to surround your best prospect with guys. Fred VanVleet, a veteran who's won a championship, like I said, is a great guy to pair Victor with. He can run the point, be a good asset too. You know, he can shoot. Like I said, again, you have a ton of cap space with the Spurs, and this is a great guy to start with. The Rockets, I think, would be good. VanVleet and Jalen Green is a pretty good backcourt. Sorry. Pretty good backcourt. And so I think if the Rockets are trying to rebuild, that's another guy who's good to pick up. And I believe the Rockets got one of the Thompson twins in the draft too. And so those three could be deadly, man. I mean, just saying. And then the reason I said possibly Sixers is I don't like Fred VanVleet to the Sixers if James Harden is still there. James Harden is still there. I think that team is doomed. I'm not a James Harden fan. Sorry if you are. I think he has great statistics, and I think statistically he is a great individual player. I just don't think he's a good team player. If you look at the history of his teams, he just hasn't had a ton of success. And the only time he's gone to the finals was with Thunder when he was very young. And I'm pretty sure he was coming off the bench at that time. So, teams that are, I think, just okay for him to land on, the Clippers. Again, another team where I feel like the situation there isn't great for either. Just because there's a lot of, I don't know, the Clippers just haven't really played to par of what they were supposed to be. Kawhi, Paul George, all those guys, I think. Which, honestly, he's played with Kawhi. So maybe, who knows? Maybe he would be a good fit with the Clippers. But I'm not a huge fan of it, personally. The Jazz kind of have a loaded front court. Or backcourt. Why do I keep saying front court? Kind of have a loaded backcourt. So I feel like it's not necessarily essential that the Jazz pick this guy up. They have Colin Sexton. I want to say Jordan Clarkson. A bunch of other guys. So not essential. Same with Magic. I just feel like, again, not essential. I feel like you just loading up, and maybe depth is a good thing. I mean, it is when you get in the playoffs, injuries happen, load management happens, whatever, but I just not a huge fan of the move, personally. The next question in this free agency is, where does Reeves go? Does he stay with the Lakers? If he stays with the Lakers and they sign Fred VanVleet, you got a decent backcourt. Reeves got his paycheck by what he did in the playoffs. Him being an essential part in the Lakers team, like him being their third best player, was huge. He proves, we're looking at, I was reading something the other day, basically he could sign a 3 or 4 year, like $50 million deal with the Lakers, which is a big upgrade from what he was getting. But if he chooses to decline that, the other teams would basically have to match with $70 million deal, and then Lakers would have to match that to compete, So it's like, this guy's in for a decent amount of paycheck, and I think it just depends on how well LeBron can scout, I guess, not scout, recruit, that's a better word, and how desperate or greedy Austin Reeves is with his money. Like, does he want a big paycheck? Like, does he think that somebody wants him that bad? Like, are the Spurs a team that are like, yo, this guy's young, he just had a great playoff series, again, another guy we want to surround our new star with? I don't know. Like, it's a good question to ask. And then Cam Johnson declined his deal with the Nets. It was a money ploy. He played very well during the season. I think people are starting to realize, I've always liked Cam Johnson. I actually think the trade that the Suns made really drained all of their depth. And I don't know if I necessarily liked it. Like, it's really hard for me to say, bro, don't go for KD. But it's like, you drained pretty much your whole team just to get Kevin Durant. Like, there's only 6 guys on salary for the Suns. You can't play with just 6 guys, bro. Like, it's so draining to the core of your team, and I think Cam Johnson was just one of those role player guys who you could rely on. Like, when Cam Johnson was in, I knew he was going to get boards, and I knew he was going to shoot corner threes, and most of his corner threes were going to go in. Because he was reliable. And you need guys like that, especially if you want to go deep in the playoffs. Cam Johnson is a very good player to have on your team, a very good role player to have on your team. He can do a lot on the court. He can do a lot on the court for a team. So, but yeah, he declined his deal. So we'll see if he stays with the Nets. He could just be doing it as a ploy to get more offers from them, or he could go somewhere else. Again, I know I keep throwing it out. The Spurs, maybe. If the Lakers get rid of Rui, possible landing spot for him. I'm not huge, I don't know off the top of my head how much cap space everyone has. I know some of the biggest ones are the Spurs, the Rockets, the Magic, the Jazz are pretty much most of the teams who have a lot of cap space. And so those teams keep popping up in those conversations. And so, it just depends on who's willing to write the checkbook and who's willing to recruit that hard to convince that person to go there. Who has the assets? Who thinks they can convince this guy, Cam Johnson, we're going to make a playoff run and we're going to go deep. And then some other notable names. Grant Williams, is he going to stay with Celtics? Again, did he prove his paycheck? Playoffs, he didn't play a whole lot. And when he did, was he good enough to get the paycheck he wants? I don't know. We'll see. I think that's another interesting one going to be down the line. Rui is another interesting one. He also played very well in the playoffs, actually. And I wouldn't be surprised if they re-signed him. I think he can do some good on the Lakers, and I think he felt, a little bit more revived. Does that make sense? During the playoffs, he looked like he could be on a very good role player for a team. As far as other names, Kyle Kuzma, Russell Westbrook, and D'Angelo Russell, which is why I talked about Fred VanVleet a lot. Dylan Brooks could be going to Japan. Who knows? Jeremy Grant. Sorry, I'm reading from my list here. Jeremy Grant, Bruce Brown, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and Jordan Clarkson. So, of those names, I think Bruce Brown, I wouldn't be surprised if he re-signed. Strus and Gabe Vincent, we'll see. Again, you make money when you do well in the playoffs, and both those guys had good streaks. So we'll see. They just went to the finals. And I don't know where the cap situation is at with the Heat, if they're going to be able to re-sign him. Jeremy Grant's another guy that's good to pick up, and so we'll see where they end up. It's going to be interesting free agency. It always is with the NBA, pretty much with any sport nowadays, just because people aren't as loyal as they used to be, and that's changed a lot, and that's a big part of the culture is where can I go that has a team that's that's going to win a championship, which is fair to a certain extent. So, but yeah, I think that's all I'm going to talk about right now for the NBA. Our next little segue, we're going to segue off here into the MLB. I saw this statistic yesterday, and I really wanted to talk about it. So as of yesterday, so the standings could have changed. The 4 out of the 6 teams who lead their division are below average on the payroll. The Rays, in particular, who were first in the league, and I believe in the MLB too, up until today, I think the Braves actually just passed them, are 28th in payroll. There's only 30 teams in the MLB. The Twins are 16th, the Reds are 25th, and the Diamondbacks are 20th. Even more interesting, the teams that are above the average aren't even in the top 5 of payroll. Braves are 7th and the Rangers are 8th. In second of those divisions, 5 out of 6 of those teams aren't above average. And so the reason I want to talk about this is because does it pose the question, does money and payroll, like in baseball, matter as much as it does in other sports? Yeah, I think it's a good question. I feel like what we're seeing right now in baseball is that farm systems are much more important than necessarily getting big names. Same with team chemistry. Team chemistry is, I think, a very underrated part of baseball, and here's why. Baseball, you play 162 games, and you sometimes don't even get a day off in the week. And so it's a very, very tough sport. And so if you don't get along with your guys in the play, like in the locker room, you're not, like, your team's just not going to be successful. And I think it also kind of opens your eyes to, wow, all these guys are paying a bunch of big names. For example, the Mets, like, they have Scherzer, Verlander, Lindor, Alonso, like, then, the names go on and on. And I believe they actually are the highest in payroll. And they're third in their division. And granted, this is still early in the season. Basically, like, there's a lot subject to change. But my point being, is baseball even more of a, you can't really clash a bunch of egos? You know what I'm saying? Like, with these big payroll teams, are there too many egos in their locker room, in their bullpen, in their roster to work as a team to, grind out wins? You know what I'm saying? Like, and I also wonder, maybe with bigger payrolls, with the guys with big contracts, do they have more pressure on them to perform night to night? Maybe these guys like the Rays, like, we've seen guys like Yandy Diaz have a great season. Wander Frank, like, these guys don't have as much pressure as some guys like, Pete Alonso, Mike, like, all these guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just an interesting thing I wanted to bring up, just because I think so often we feel that the big money organizations are going to win in baseball, and right now that's not necessarily happening. And I think it's good for the sport. I think it's bringing in more of a, like, fan base to watch. Like, I just, like, I don't know. I think it's cool to see teams like the Diamondbacks and the Pirates and the Reds and, like, all these teams, like, compete again, because for so long I feel like they haven't really competed, and so to see them be back in the mix is, like, good. It's good for the sport of baseball. Yeah, I'm excited. I think, yeah. The other thing I want to bring up with baseball, it's more of a grievance than anything, just how annoying the All-Star Game voting is. Like, why Canadians quit voting every single player on your team? Like, I'm gonna look it up right now. Is your team, like, I don't even think they're first in the division. Like, well, I know they're not first in the division. Are they even second in the division? Like, one second. Let me look this up, because this is something I want to bring up. Where is it? Standings. Your team is currently 4th in the AL East, meaning why is every position have the option for a Blue Jays player? You're telling me that basically you're telling me you have the best team in the league, but that you're just not winning enough games to do it? Doesn't make sense to me. Like, if anyone should be having it, should be the Rays in the AL. Like, which there are a lot of Rays players, but reasonably so. You know what I'm saying? Like, that makes sense. What doesn't make sense is that every position for the Blue Jays has top in voting. Obviously, like, God, it bothers me so much. All right, getting into hip hop. Just want to talk about a few things. Not a super busy week this week, but last week, Business is Business is dropped, which is Young Thug's latest album. I believe his last album was Punk or something like that. And so I personally feel like this is his best project that he's had out since the release of So Much Fun. When I started the album, I liked the first song. I thought the production on it was cool. I liked the little call-in. But then the album started to dwindle for a little bit. I actually was about to give up on the album. But I kept listening like a good reviewer does, and kept listening to what he said or what the album sounded like and that kind of thing. And about when with the Racks hit, that little middle stretch there brought me back in and made me like this album again. I think some of the features on this were great. 21 Savage twice had very good verses. Even Travis, even though I hate to say it, he had a good verse as well. My favorite song on this album is Jonesboro. I just think it's really good song. Very melodic. Reminds me of classic Young Thug. I think it was a very good bounce back album for Young Thug, especially after having so much controversy surround him. Much like Gunna, I think it's a very good segue back into the hip hop world. And I'm excited to see what's next. It sounds like there's a deluxe. I think it actually dropped. I haven't listened to the deluxe yet. But overall, I think this album was one of his better albums for sure. He did a very good job. I think the cover art is going to be iconic. I don't know. It's just like there's certain album covers where you look at and you're just like, people are going to remember that one. Like that. You know what I'm saying? Especially, I think there's some really good songs and a lot of good songs that have potential to be hits for him on this album. So I was a big fan of it. I wasn't at first. Took a little warming up, but I think he did a very good job. In other news, it sounds like Pink Tape by Lil Uzi Vert is going to be coming out this Friday, which is exciting. I believe this is his first album since his collab album with Future. Unless you count his little LP that he did, which I forgot the name of, but it was around, I want to say, August, maybe July last year. And so Future, Baby Keem, and Travis are all rumored to be featuring on this. It's a 26-song album, which I have mixed feelings about. I've always felt like the albums that have a lot of songs on them are more likely to have skips on them. To me, if you have a 26-song album, there's bound to be skips unless it's a perfect album, which most perfect albums are around that 12 to 18 range would be my. I think anything over 18 is just start to get repetitive, especially if you're trying to make an album. I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. Eternal Take I liked at first. It didn't age well. And so we'll see how this not only does, but also ages. Because I think something with Lil Uzi and something he's struggled a little bit with is making songs that can be classics. Like, let me reiterate that. Songs, okay, lately, Lil Uzi has been struggling with making songs that can be classics and that kind of thing. Replayability, I guess is the right word for it. So we'll see how it turns out. I'm excited. But yeah, that's all I've really got for the music section of this podcast. Moving on into our fashion segment. Our sneaker drops this week, or notable sneaker drops this week. The Team Gold came out today in the Dunks. The white infrared Jordan 7s come out this week. Same with the Jordan 1 Low Knockout Breads and the Bape Adidas collabed Campus 80s. So be on the watch out for those if you're into any of those. As far as fashion in general, something I want to bring up and talk about is what Pharell Williams and Travis Scott are doing. Travis Scott, Utopia, big drop. Everyone loves Travis Scott. What Travis Scott, and I have to give him credit for this, is he's done a great job at being a marketer and promoting his albums. He makes a lot of buzz. Wherever he goes, whatever he does, he brings things to promote his album. He reminds me of Tyler, the Creator, in that way of promoting your albums for a long time and building up this hype before dropping them. And I feel like a lot of people can learn from what he does because he's been very successful in not only the hip-hop world but also the fashion world. And so with that being said, Travis Scott has been seen wearing Pharrell Williams' Louis Vuitton collection. And so now there's rumors if they're doing a collab on Utopia times Louis Vuitton times Pharrell, huge collab opportunities, that kind of thing. Going to Pharrell Williams, this is a conversation I want to have because I think what he is doing with a high fashion brand like Louis Vuitton is not trying to disrespect. Is similar, note the word similar, not the same, similar to what Virgil Abloh did with Off-White and his work with Louis Vuitton. I think he kind of made steps towards what Pharrell's doing. Pharrell is starting to bridge this gap between high fashion and everyday streetwear. Now, there's still a gap. That's why I said starting to bridge a gap. The collection Pharrell made was much different than what you're seeing out of Louis Vuitton. But I think it was perceived well, especially because I feel like Louis Vuitton's audience is ever changing. And I think it will continue to change. What hip-hop artists in general have done, like Pharrell, even Kanye, whether you want to admit it or not, Travis Scott, A$AP Rocky, the list goes on. What they have done to the fashion world and bringing streetwear into just about any clothing department is making waves, and I think it's going to continue to bring in more middle-class consumers, not necessarily maybe middle-class consumers purchasing those high fashion goods all the time, but I do think it has potential to what's the word for it? I think it has potential to get them more interested in high fashion. I feel like For a long time, high fashion was very inaccessible to the everyday person, and it was more so of a luxury good, and people were only into fashion if they had the money for it. And I think this at least gives opportunity for inspiration for everyday people. I'm not saying like they're gonna be able to like purchase this stuff, wear it all the time, that kind of thing. But I do think it brings a lot more inspiration, and I think it brings light to the fact that like, are we moving into a fashion world where there aren't these big gaps between high fashion and streetwear and everyday casual wear? I mean, look at Fear of God. Like, they've bridged the gap between streetwear and casual wear, and some people may even say athleisure, and like these gaps keep getting like closed, not all the way, but like closer. And so it makes you wonder how like melded in these brands are going to continue to become, because eventually it's like, what do you even label it as now? You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. We'll see. It's cool. I think it's honestly very cool. I think what is happening in the fashion world, and all these collaborations and creativeness between different artists and celebrities and that kind of thing. But I guess I'm just interested to see where it goes, and that's all I can be. So, and then going into my last segment, which for those of you who don't know, it's something I started. It's called Mystery Box Topic of the Week. Eventually, I'd like to get this brought in by fans. For now, I'm just going to bring it. This one's not like super upbeat. They're usually upbeat. But this week, I did want to bring light to Ryan Mallett. Ryan Mallett passed away. Sadly, he was one of the best Arkansas quarterbacks within the last 20 years by far. I remember him as a prospect. The arm was incredible, and a lot of people like thought he was going to be the Tom Brady replacement when he got drafted. And so to ever be considered that in general is actually a huge compliment. Obviously, he never was, but he was always considered a very good backup to Tom Brady. He played for a lot of different teams, and was their backup. Was a good backup, and I want to say even played in some other leagues. I'm not quite sure what other leagues. But he was a high school football coach when he passed away. And so, I just want to give him his respects. I think he was a very good football player, and yeah. Thank you for listening, watching, wherever you saw this. Appreciate you. I will be trying to post as much as I can. I believe my next podcast will be with a special guest star, kind of going over more some NFL stuff, as well as music and fashion. So make sure to tune in again. And thank you.